Hello students, you're on to Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates, still literature in English. I want to look at an interesting poem today.
Eko Learners Support, a support program of the Lagos State Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education for WAEC and NECO candidates.
It's a non-African poetry titled Digging by Seamus Heaney. We're going to be focusing on the themes and poetic devices in this poem. Okay, so at the end of this lesson, you should be able to explain the poem, discuss the themes of the poem, and you will be able to explain the use of poetic devices in the poem. So let's look at a brief background. Seamus Heaney was an Irish poet, playwright, and translator. He received the 1995 Nobel Prize for Literature. The speaker observes his father and grandfather's work as diggers and reflects on his own path as a writer. Now, in this poem, it's just a brief summary of the poem. The writer or the poet was just trying to explain his own current occupation from the standpoint of what is common to their family, and which is farming, F-A-R-M-I-N-G. The speaker observes his father and grandfather's works as diggers and reflects on his own path as a writer. He contrasts the physical labor of farming with intellectual labor of writing, and he concludes with a determination to dig with his pen, which was how he concludes the poem. Let's go deeper into this analysis. What are the themes that we find in this poem? The first is the theme of family heritage. The poem explores the speaker's connection to his family's farming past. When the poet began, he started by saying that a pen is in between my fingers, my thumb and my finger. And he said, the pen squats and sits like a gun. Of course, he gives us a very powerful picture of how a person holds a pen to write. He's obviously at his table and he's trying to document or write some things. And then he bends, his window is open, and then he looks through the window and sees his father digging. He emphasizes the pride and respect for the hard work of his father. And he doesn't just stop with his father, but also his grandfather. When he continues the poem, at a point he says, by God, the old man could handle a spade. The spade becomes a symbol of an instrument of labor. Because as we go on in the poem, you discover that the spade is now being contrasted with the pen. So it presents to us a picture of his father digging at the window and tells us that it's a common practice in their family. Then he explains that not only his father knows how to use the spade, but even his grandfather. That tells us that farming and planting is a generational vocation in their family. And it's a very, very unique vocation also in Ireland. Don't forget that Seamus is an Irish poet. Let's go ahead. We also have the theme of identity. The speaker grapples with his identity, choosing a different path from his ancestors. And this highlights the tension between following tradition and forging one's path, that is, deciding the path that you want to take. Now, this is an example here. In succeeding lines, you discover that he said, but I have no spade to follow men like them. What does it mean by men like them? He was talking about his father and his grandfather. But I think the poet is now curious, and he began to reflect whether he is doing the right thing by not taking the spade and digging like his father and his grandfather. But he resolves that he has chosen not to use the spade like his parents, but he has chosen something different from just planting and harvesting and digging, of course. But don't forget that the poet has not condemned the vocation of his father. In fact, he appreciates the heritage and the family heritage, which is hard work, planting and harvesting. Now, it's important for us to establish that a lot of things were used to describe what exactly is being harvested. For the fathers, potato is one thing that is very, very, very important. I'm sure you know Irish potatoes. And it's universally known that Irish potatoes are very nutritious and can be enjoyable when you use them in different meals. So the Irish potato or the potato becomes a symbol itself of great harvest, symbol of the result of hard work. He mentions the potatoes severally, cold potatoes in his hand, when he reflects in the past how he works with his father on the farm and they dig the floor together. In the same squatting position, he mentions the father's boots and the squatting position of his father, the same way the pen squats on the fingers of the poet. But don't forget that the poet is trying now to forge a new vocation or profession for himself. And this brings us to the theme of the power of writing. Writing is presented as a form of digging, uncovering truths, and preserving memories. How are we able to know about the poet's father and the poet's grandfather? The poet tries to justify his own vocation by saying that as a writer, he has been able to preserve the memory of his family and even his country. There was a period and a time of the Irish famine, and there was serious scarcity of food, especially the potatoes that we are even talking about. And I'm sure that he has just alluded those times, and he has carved out a special niche for himself, which is writing, which still helps us to know some of the things that have happened in history. Okay? The pen becomes a metaphorical tool for the speaker's work. So we see the pen as a representative of literacy, being the position of being learned. Now, an example is he uses, he says, between my finger and my thumb. Don't forget, he said the squat pen rests. He did not stop there. He says, I will dig with it. So what's the contrast here? His father and his grandfather. The poet persona's father and grandfather dug with the spade, but he has chosen to dig with his pen, create beautiful memories, and let people understand who they are through his writings. So what are some of the poetic devices that have been used in this poem? Number one, we have the use of imagery. Heaney uses vivid imagery to bring the scenes of digging to life. I'm sure that even while I spoke, you would have seen the pictures of a man or men, bending on a farm to dig and bring out potatoes and plant and several others. So because I've created this visual picture in your mind, that's what we call visual imagery. An example is the cold smell of potato mold when he was trying to explain how he enjoyed that time farming digging potatoes, he mentions a cold smell of potato mold. Now, when you dig out your potato, there are sand particles around the potato, and when you smell it, there's a particular sensation you get. That is what the poet persona is trying to describe here, and he has just used words to appeal to our sense of smell. That is called olfactory imagery. And of course, he says the squelch and slap of soggy peat. These are words. For instance, the word soggy. Here, to mean something that is soft and wet. Now, you can't know that unless you have held it in your hands and you have felt it. This, it tries to present an imagery known as tactile imagery, where you can feel, what the poet is trying to describe by merely reading. Now, we also have metaphor. The pen is compared to a spade, symbolizing the speaker's craft as a writer. Do not forget that the pen is the spade and the spade is the pen. But for the writer, his own spade is his pen. Now, example, the squat pen rests snug as a gun. Now, of course, you know snug as a gun is a simile. However, it represents the power and potential of writing. Okay, let's look at another device, alliteration. Alliteration, of course, I'm sure you know that an alliteration is the repetition of the same consonant sound at the initial level, that's at the beginning level of words in a line of poetry. This is an example here. We have spade sinks, tells us and gives us a picture of how the spade goes into the soil, and you can see the picture displayed on the screen. Then you also have gravely ground, telling us how deeply the spade goes into the ground. All right, now let's move on to the next. We also have the use of assonance. It's a figure of sound where vowel sounds are repeated in the middle of words. Look at this. We have rasping sound. Apart from the fact that we have an auditory imagery here, we also have an assonance. And what's the assonance? Rasping sound. Do not forget that what you have here, you have the sound ha. And then you also have a double sound here, ha and hu. But this is the sound that has been created. This vowel sound, ha, has been used again and repeated. And so when you have repetition of same vowel sounds, it is known as what? Assonance. All right, these devices enrich the musicality and the rhythm of the poem. So let's practice. How is contrast used in the poem? How is contrast used in the poem? First of all, what is contrast? You need to know that. That contrast is a broad comparison between two things that are usually unrelated. Now, to discover the similarities or the differences. So when you contrast, when you bring two things together, to check, okay, how different or how similar you are doing the contrast. Now, what is the contrast, the major contrast in this poem? We have a contrast between the olden times and the new or the modern age. Let me say it that way. So we have a contrast between the olden day, or let me just say days, in Ireland, and you also have, Ireland and the new or modern age. So we know what happens in the olden days. The olden days, fathers are given more to farming. Farming used to be the major occupation of people in those times. But in the modern day, people have developed try to forge their own area of focus of career. And for the poets, it's writing. So we have farming against writing. And then don't forget that we also have the pen and the spade, which of course represents this same thing that I've written here, the pen and the spade. Okay? Now, it's important for you to know that at a point in time in the poem, the poet persona explains that he brings milk to his father in the field, and immediately the father gets it and enjoys it. That also projects the theme of sustenance, where people could even go into subsistence farming and help themselves. Okay? Nevertheless, the poet, as much as he appreciates those times, is not bothered. He's still comforted by what he is doing now, because it's also very important in the society to help to preserve culture and preserve history. Thank you very much for listening. Don't forget, if you have questions, if you have comments, please try to reach us on our social media handles displayed on the screen. Thank you.
Acing your WAEC and NECO examinations has been made easy by the Lagos State Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education with the Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO Candidates television program. Join seasoned teachers as they take you through these core subjects, targeting the exact syllabus of WAEC and NECO. Watch Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates through these social media platforms to access more educational content and give their feedback. Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates. Pass your examinations with flying colors.